This episode of the Jack Tomczak Show is brought to you by Scott Schulte and High 10 Service in Coon Rapids. Visit high10service.com to schedule your vehicle's appointment. That's high10service.com.
It's the Jack Tomczak Show.
Good afternoon, Twin Cities. Up and let's go. I'm Jack Tomczak. Thanks for tuning in today. In the second hour of the show at 4, Nate Atkins, Libertarian Party candidate for mayor of Minneapolis, will be in studio for that whole hour. We'll find out how his campaign is going and exactly where he'll be having his victory celebration on Tuesday. Yeah. But in studio now, we have fan favorite Rob Doar. Say hello, Rob Doar.
Hello, Rob Doar.
In his capacity as a Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus guy, and Kurtis Hannah.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Who, if you are a longtime fan, consumer, listener of whatever it is I do, Kurtis, you were on another show I was doing. What year?
I think 2013 or 14.
It's been a while.
It has.
And I'm sorry for it being so long.
Hey, well, better late than never.
Okay. And you are with Republicans Against Marijuana Prohibition.
Correct.
Okay. NASCAR Kelly, my friend of the show, said to me a few months ago, you got to have this guy on. He's a Republican, but he's for marijuana. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. What's his name? He's like, hang on, let me check. Kurtis Hannah. I'm like, I had him on before. I didn't know it was a million years ago, but there we go. Okay, we're going to do marijuana and guns and marijuana. Let's start with just guns. Kurtis, feel free to chime in if you'd like. Here's what I've learned in the last week, Rob Doar. Movie set prop guns are just real guns.
They can be.
They can be. They're
Yes.
not always, but they
Not
can
always.
be.
Well, there's varying degrees of prop guns.
Okay.
Tipping the deck here. What you've been hearing in the news recently was a real firearm that was being used as a prop in a movie. That's different than a prop gun. A prop gun does not fire.
Okay.
It looks like a gun. But it is incapable of launching a projectile.
Okay.
So it was not a prop gun that Alec Baldwin used.
It was a real gun that when real guns are used in movies, they're supposed to have what I understand to be blanks.
So
in
there's
them.
two types of ammunition that are used.
I love that you know things, Rob. You're just the best.
There's two types of ammunition that are used when you're using real firearms as props. One is a blank, which is a primer, a gunpowder charge in a metal casing, but there's no bullet. There's no projectile. It's usually sealed with a piece of wax, or the metal is just crimped over.
Okay.
So it can't hurt anybody. It can't fire anything. Then the other one is, if let's say you need something that looks like a real bullet, but you don't need it to fire. Those are bullets with usually BBs inside of them, so you can shake them and you hear it like a rattle. And then they also, without a primer and without gunpowder, are incapable of launching a projectile. So those are typically the two. There is never a situation on any movie set where there should be live ammunition.
That's what I don't understand about this whole thing, and I don't think anybody knows exactly what has happened. And I guess in the last hour or so, Alec Baldwin did say something, and that something was, I can't say anything because it's an ongoing investigation. But what I don't understand is, what I do understand is that every gun is loaded. Never point a gun at something unless your intention is to kill
or destroy it.
Yeah. And so I get all that, and even in a movie set, you're supposed to follow those rules.
Yes.
Because if you don't, this happens. So I get that. What I don't understand is why on earth there was a live round, an actual bullet, anywhere near that movie set.
Right.
And I don't get it.
Yeah, and there are prop masters and armorers who it is their job to make sure that all of these things are completely clear, and in what looks like that the process that should have been followed was not followed. But even like let's just say all of that being the case, that even if Alec Baldwin was handed a gun, was told it was clear, me as a gun owner, I don't believe anybody when they tell me a gun is clear until I check it myself.
Mm-hmm.
I like if I see you physically unload the gun and hand it to me, I still don't believe it's clear until I see it with my own eyes.
Because the consequences, if the thing that you didn't do was messed up, is somebody could die.
Right. Well, and you got 2 of the 4 rules of gun safety there. The first rule of gun safety never point a gun at anything you don't want to kill or destroy. Yep. And then you treat every gun as if it's loaded. So those are the first 2 core rules. So treat it as if it's loaded. Don't point it at anything you don't want to kill or destroy. You keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot, and then you know your target and what's behind it, because bullets don't stop where you want them to. They keep going until something stops them.
Yeah.
Those 4 rules are redundant, because if you forget one of them, you still won't kill anybody. So if you point a loaded gun at somebody but your finger's not on the trigger, it's not going to go off. If you have a loaded gun and you pull the trigger but it's not pointed at anything you don't want to kill or destroy, you're not going to kill or destroy anything. So that's where I don't understand. I've been in theater productions, community theater, high school.
You seem like the type.
Yeah, thank you. I was also captain of the lacrosse team. So
hey, I was a drama nerd too, man.
Yeah, there we go. But even on stage, when you're using basically cap guns that have zero capability of firing a projectile, you still, just out of abundance of caution, don't point it at anybody. You point it over their head and over their shoulder, and you just hope that the audience can get that suspension of disbelief. You don't, he didn't actually shoot him. You know?
Right.
And I understand in a movie you don't want to break the immersion, and I guess in this particular shot they wanted the bullet going through the camera.
Yeah.
Like, that was what they were going for.
Okay, I have a. You finish your point, then I'll tell my little story.
But even then, like, absent everything, we've got technology now where, like, you don't need a person sitting there right behind the camera.
Okay,
So maybe,
now I'm going to say my point right now. I have a video on Instagram where I'm shooting my son's Nerf gun from my couch right to the camera.
Yep.
I missed the camera, so I went in later with After Effects, and I made it look like I didn't miss the camera. And I'm just some dude with the Adobe suite of programs, and it took me 5 minutes, and Hollywood can make me believe almost anything is real on screen. So
Right.
you don't need to do what they did.
there is no real Death Star.
What?
Well, and that's kind of where I was going. Is one, let's say you wanted to use a blank cartridge so that you have all the ambient lighting that you get from that real muzzle flash and all that stuff. Maybe for that one shot, have the director of photography looking at a remote monitor instead of being right behind the camera.
Yeah.
There's so many things that could have been done to mitigate this, but it was just laziness and unsafe practices.
And the consequences.
Yeah.
It's like how people, I've said this before, but people forget how serious driving an automobile is. It's like you got a 2-ton hunk of speed and metal and death, and people are checking their phone and doing their makeup. And I saw somebody eating soup once. And people
That's a two-handed endeavor.
They get cavalier with that, not remembering that if things go awry, like you can kill you and everybody around you. And that can't happen with guns.
Right.
That's not good. People on our side are making a lot of hay about Alec Baldwin, because he's such a radical lefty. And again, since I don't know what on the internet is true, I don't know if he had a tweet or a Facebook post ripping on Dick Cheney for shooting somebody in the face years and years and years ago. But I've seen that thing pop up, and it's easy to do the victory dance when your opponent screws up.
Yeah.
I'm like, somebody died here.
Yeah, I find that all in terrible taste.
Yeah.
It's the least of which is that it wasn't technically Alec Baldwin's job to make sure that gun was fired or wasn't loaded. Even though, what I'm saying being true, that I think that anybody who's handling a firearm should be proficient in firearm safety, no matter what. But it wasn't his job. he clearly didn't intend to hurt
Right.
anybody.
Right.
I've seen that conspiracy theory that they had a disagreement and whatever.
He's not going to risk his bazillion-dollar lifestyle.
Right. And Alec Baldwin is someone as an actor who I thoroughly enjoy.
Me too. He's good.
I'm capable of separating this, their own
Absolutely.
political views from, hey, dance for me, monkey. I want you to entertain me. I'm very happy to do that. But at the end of the day, there are things that should have been done that could have been done that to mitigate these risks.
Yeah. And prior to taking my permit to carry class, I wouldn't have known the stuff you're supposed to do when handed a firearm.
You must have had a great instructor.
I had a really, really great instructor. Tall guy. Had a flair for the dramatic. I think it was an actor back in the day. And this is not the best advice, political advice I was ever given was given to me by Rod Graham's wife, Chris. If it feels good to say it, don't.
Yeah.
This is not an opportunity to make Alec Baldwin look or feel stupid. He looks and feels stupid already. This is an opportunity to have a conversation about gun safety.
Yeah.
Which we're having, and I hope more people have. And it's important because sometime you may be in that situation, person who never handles a gun. And maybe you'll remember something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I was talking to some gun people last Monday, weekish ago, and they were criticizing Alec Baldwin, and somebody, they said, well, you should open the magazine up or take the magazine out and look. If the top bullet is a blank, you can't see the bullets underneath that,
Well, they were
right?
using revolvers
Okay.
on this set, so and that's part of the problem is the cartridges that should have been in this firearm should have been those dummy rounds that can't fire. So really, unless you've got a really trained eye, you're not going to notice any difference. And that's how they want it with revolvers, because when you've got the camera shot, you can see the bullets inside the cylinder, as it's rotating. So it's not like a semi-automatic where all the cartridges are concealed. So, but yeah, I mean, in that instance, that's true too, is you can look at the top round, you might get a glimpse of the second round, but anything below that in a semi-automatic, you don't know.
Yeah. They're going to find out what happened at some point.
I mean, I think it's pretty clear what, these are probably somebody, I mean, this is a low budget production. I guess it had been cited for some other safety issues. They were cutting corners. They were using a 24-year-old armorer whose really only experience was her dad was an armorer. She doesn't have any professional certifications beyond kind of just that armorer certification.
Kind of like how Amy Klobuchar got elected to the U.S. Senate because her dad was a reporter for a long time.
Something like that. So I think, there were a lot of people and that maybe didn't have the skill set, but these are probably somebody's personal firearms. Like they didn't even go out to buy them, and somebody left a cartridge somewhere where it shouldn't have been. Some bad practices were followed, but I mean, all of this again completely avoidable with just proper safety considerations.
Yeah. All right, let's we're gonna take a break.
All right.
And then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about, there's an article in MinnPost by Peter Callahan, why federal regulations are likely to keep lawful gun owners away from Minnesota's medical cannabis program. We will get into that with Rob Doar and Kurtis Hannah. You're listening to the Jack Tomczak Show on AM 1280 The Patriot. Welcome back to the Jack Tomczak Show. That's me. The guy the show is named after. In studio, we have Rob Doar with the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. And we have Kurtis Hannah with Republicans Against Marijuana Prohibition. All right. Ramp. Isn't that like a wild onion?
Yes.
A ramp?
A ramp is a wild onion.
Yes. Cooking with Jack and
I
Rob.
haven't heard of that. Ramp is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you can find them in the woods.
Dang.
Or you can just go to the grocery store and buy an onion.
Yeah, ramps are like this big when you dig them up. So.
All right, MinnPost, article by Peter Callahan, why federal regulations are likely to keep lawful gun owners away from Minnesota's medical cannabis program. The conflict stems from a federal government policy of denying gun purchases and transfers to anyone who signs up for a state's medical cannabis program. Rob, since you've done a lot of talking already, let's go to Kurtis. Kurtis, explain that.
Yeah, so essentially, even though over 36 states have medical cannabis laws on the books, the federal government has yet to recognize that cannabis has currently accepted medical use in the United States. And because of that, it has remained in Schedule 1 since 1970. We're coming up close upon a time where this will actually have been wrong more than right. In 1996, 26 years after the Controlled Substances Act was passed, California was the first state to say cannabis is a medicine. Since that time, it's been about 26 years. So it makes no sense to keep cannabis in Schedule 1, but that is the defining reason why the ATF has decided that medical cannabis patients cannot have cannabis, even if it's allowable under state law.
Okay. What are other Schedule 1 drugs?
Yeah, so something like heroin or LSD would be a Schedule 1.
Rob, if I get busted for having heroin or LSD, does that take away my ability to own a firearm?
Yes, it's depending on the circumstances, but if you are an unlawful user or addicted to any controlled substance, so not just Schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, if you're unlawful user or addicted to any of them, you are prohibited by federal law from possessing a firearm.
Okay, so because people are signing up for the medical cannabis program, the federal government's like, you're admitting that this is your thing that you use, no guns for you.
So the federal government really doesn't care about this. This issue is coming from the state level. There's in the article, it also talks about State Rep Rod Hamilton, who I've talked to about this issue numerous times, and I know Kurtis has worked with him as well, that he signed up for the medical cannabis program before he even filled his actual prescription. He signed up for it at the advice of his doctor. He suffers from cerebral palsy, I think, or is it MS?
I think it's MS.
I'll find
okay,
it, but
I'm
I
sorry.
think it's MS.
Yeah, I think it is MS. Sorry about that. He suffers from MS. He's in a wheelchair. He's in the Capitol.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, in a wheelchair going around. He signed up for the program at the advice of his doctor for some of his pain relief. He was still contemplating whether he was actually going to use it.
Mm-hmm.
Before even fulfilling his prescription, he had his permit to carry revoked.
Wow.
By his local sheriff, and so they, their rationale was that yes, it's legal in Minnesota, but in Minnesota law, you cannot possess a firearm if you're prohibited from owning or possessing a firearm from any state law or any federal law. And here's where it just gets crazy town, where we have the state of Minnesota telling a class of people, you are okay to use cannabis. The state is okay with this, but if you do, we will also use the state law to restrict your firearm rights.
Now, can you use medical marijuana and operate a motor vehicle?
I don't believe that you're supposed to be impaired while driving, no matter what the status is. Even if you're prescribed prescription drugs, you're not supposed to be impaired while driving. And we have drug recognition experts that will come if you get pulled over, if you're suspected of being impaired, and they will run a test to determine if you are.
That was a stupid point on my part, because that is, if you are impaired at the time, you can't drive, but it's not like they take away your driver's license for forever.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So you cannot drive while impaired from any substance, any controlled substance, including alcohol. So the roadside test that they do, that there's a 4-stage test that they do. You have the walk and turn. They check for the horizontal or the vertical and horizontal nystagmus in your eyes, the bounciness if you're on something. That's pretty universal across a lot of narcotics. So there isn't a breathalyzer that can tell you if somebody's consumed marijuana or the levels. You can do a THC test, but that doesn't tell you if somebody had a little bit of marijuana an hour ago or a lot of marijuana a week ago. It just tells you whether or not THC is present in their system. So you really have to rely on, and it makes sense too, because whether it's marijuana or any controlled substance, you don't really care about whether or not they use it at home or to take care of their pain, whether they're using it as directed. You care about, are they dangerous while they're on the road right now? And that's the standard that's set for the medical cannabis users.
Kurtis, last time we spoke on air, I think at this point in the conversation, I made a lot of jokes about weed, getting high, munchies, things like that. And I'm sorry, and I'm not going to do that anymore, because I think it was a real issue then. I didn't see it, but I do see now that it's a real issue, and I think marijuana should be legalized on all levels.
Yeah, I very much see it as like a civil rights type of issue.
Yeah.
Second Amendment rights is a civil right as well. But I think that people should be able to ingest what sort of drugs they would like to, in the same way that there's kind of an outrage right now that the government shouldn't be forcing you to take a certain type of drug. I believe that the opposite should also be true.
I agree. Now, with Representative Rod Hamilton, his permit to carry was revoked, and can he not own a gun right now because of this?
Yeah. So as far as the state of Minnesota is concerned, he is ineligible from possessing firearms.
Okay. And Kurtis, you brought up the very true point that gun ownership, Second Amendment right, that is a civil right. Rob, you still going to law school?
Yes.
All right. Have they covered the part where you can deny somebody a constitutional right without due process or without counsel?
I didn't need to get to law school for that one.
So what could somebody in Representative Rod Hamilton's position do to get his Second Amendment rights back that were denied without due process? I would argue also due process without counsel should count in that.
Yes. And here's where it's sticky, because if he sues for a civil rights violation, like a 1983 claim, that would have to go to federal court. And the federal court's going to look at it and say, yeah, it's illegal at the federal level. So what? If he sues, the real thing that needs to happen is the legislature needs to fix this. They need to make it so that they're clear at the state level. Any government, any authority acting under government authority power, government power can't use somebody's enrollment in the medical cannabis program, or if we're talking what's probably coming down the line, recreational cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
If they are following state laws as far as the consumption of legal products, the state cannot then use that consumption as a mechanism to restrict other fundamental rights.
Are there legal prescriptions that one can ingest that will mess them up worse than marijuana?
I would say most opiates.
Yes.
Yeah. Opiates.
I had Percocet after my back surgery, and I don't have a basic comparison because I've never used weed, but that messed me up. That messed me up far more than anybody who I've ever seen on marijuana.
And you still got to own a gun.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we got some problems.
Now the world's nuts lately. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention at all, but everything's gone insane. And like, I've evolved on this issue a lot in the last decade, but it seems like reasonable people would see this our way and make a legislative fix sooner rather than later.
And Ryan Winkler did accept a lot of these amendments to try to correct these issues. Now, whether that was a sincere effort or an effort to just punt it over to the Senate to make them look dumb, which is where my mind is more inclined to go. But I've had discussions with Carlos Mariani, the chair of the Public Safety Committee. They're all amenable to this. Representative Jeremy Munson's been really a leader on this, actually trying to fix this specific issue of firearms ownership in medical cannabis users. So there are the heads that are there, but I think along your lines of the world going crazy, there's so much political gamesmanship that's going on here with they're not making sincere efforts to advance this because they feel like it's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. The Democrats are terrified of the Green Party, or not Green Party, the marijuana parties. Yeah, the Legal Marijuana Now and the Grassroots Legalized Cannabis Party. They're terrified of them siphoning off their votes. It's cost them close elections. Mm-hmm. So they're going for this like they're full charge, making all the right noises, making all the right motions, but they're actually being at the Capitol. You see that the things that they could be doing to really make this go along, like sticking it in every single omnibus bill, really pushing forward. They're going through the motions, but they're not going through the real hard effort.
They're doing enough so they can say to somebody in the one of the marijuana parties, you don't need to exist.
Exactly.
We're doing this issue for you, so just cool out.
Yeah, we have farmer in our name.
Votes. Right, yeah. Yeah, that includes marijuana farmers. All right. Take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk more about this with Kurtis Hannah with Republicans Against Marijuana Prohibition and Rob Doar with the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. Welcome back to the Jack Tomczak Show. In the studio, Kurtis Hannah with Republicans Against Marijuana Prohibition and Rob Doar with the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. We're talking about an article in MinnPost by Peter Callahan that talks about why federal regulations are likely to keep lawful gun owners away from Minnesota's medical cannabis program. And a friend of the show, Michelle Benson, is quoted in the article. Says, Senate Health and Human Services Committee Chair Michelle Benson and gubernatorial candidate said they are willing to work on it in 2022. Quote, I was aware of it during session, but I didn't have the capacity to own the issue and resolve it, because that's what Michelle Benson does. She owns things and resolves them, Benson noted, saying it would have taken a lot of work during the final weeks of the June special session, yada, yada, yada. The purpose would be to find a path forward so that people who want to use cannabis as medicine to treat a specific condition don't lose their Second Amendment rights. So Benson's with you.
Yeah, that's
good.
Yeah, huge.
This is bad on a lot of levels. One, somebody who really does not want to lose their Second Amendment rights. The term for that is an American may not pursue medical cannabis to resolve an issue that they have that is making their life unbearable or difficult or miserable.
And we see this with a lot of things. Every time they talk about red flag laws and things like that, where they're or mental health checks for firearm ownership, all like that, is what is much more likely to happen than you to catch a person who maybe is likely to consume a product, be under the influence, and then be a danger, is you're going to deter a lot of people who from seeking the help that they need or things that would help them from that product or that service, because they're worried about losing their Second Amendment rights. Yeah, we see this with with the VA, when the VA was talking about if you have somebody acting as your financial agent on your VA account, then you lose your Second Amendment rights.
What?
Right, because the presumption there is that if you're unfit to manage your own finances, you're incompetent to own a firearm. So what we saw is a lot of people who maybe could have benefited from having that service not use that service because they didn't want to lose their gun rights. So it's same thing happens every time they're talking about the background checks, red flag laws, and cannabis. I mean, Rod Hamilton now has to wrestle with this. Hey, my doctor says this could be a really great benefit to me. Could remove a lot of my pain. Could help me out. But now he has to weigh: do I want to lose my right to hunt? Do I want to lose my right to own a gun? Do I want to lose my permit to carry by remaining in this program?
Yeah, and if you're a patient and you decide to not register with the state and you get gummy bears or edibles from another state, bring those back here, it's a double whammy, because if you have any sort of cannabis that's not bud or flower, that constitutes a felony charge in Minnesota. And if you're convicted of that felony, it's considered a crime of violence, which means that you lose your Second Amendment rights for the rest of your entire life. And so if you try to skirt the system and get caught, you're in it worse than if you just had ceased having a firearm while seeing if medical cannabis works for you within the system. But either way, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. And
there's a plant that grows out of the ground, right?
Exactly.
Okay,
it is.
Just checking.
Right.
Here's why I hate politics. I used to love politics. I no longer love politics. I hate it because it is less about making people's lives better or removing barriers from people's lives or doing good things for people. And it's more about the gamesmanship and the DFL saying enough pro-marijuana stuff to keep the marijuana parties at bay. At least that's what they're hoping. And Republicans maybe not being pro-freedom on this issue.
Not pro-freedom, but also they love the fact that the DFL has to have this fight.
Right.
If they fix this, then
the third party that siphons off votes from the DFL goes away.
Right.
And it makes elections harder for Republicans.
Right.
So let's not solve problems. Let's not do something that can take away somebody's debilitating pain and allow them to keep their Second Amendment rights. Let's keep messing around with it so we can win at the ballot box. Maybe.
Yep.
Yeah, but at some point, the DFL is going to do a good enough job showing to the public that they do care about this issue. They did pass it off the House floor. We might see a vote in the Senate this upcoming session on the floor to see where the Democrats are in the Senate. So come next year, I think that the best strategy for the party is to actually embrace this issue.
Which party?
For the Republican Party. Okay. I believe that they should embrace adult use cannabis legalization, or they should have a comprehensive reform of the medical program to focus on access instead of this research program we have right now. And they should decriminalize or lower the penalties for possession of personal amounts of cannabis, just to show that they're not old fuddy-duddies, that they actually care about their base.
Oh, we're
because the
terrible at doing
majority of the people in our party want to see some reform to happen.
Republicans will get hip to the realities of marijuana years after it becomes law and years after it's cost us an election. Like, you know what, we were really on the wrong side of that one.
Right.
And by the way, marry whoever the hell you want.
Yeah. Funny how that works.
Watch next year. Watch the lit that goes out by the DFL or whatever union is paying for the mailer in Rod Hamilton's district. If there's one that says his Second Amendment rights were denied because the government thinks he's dangerous, because they'll do that.
Yeah.
Because politics is for horrible people who think horrible things and do horrible stuff.
Yeah. Well, the good thing for him is like a toaster with a Republican after its name will get elected in his district.
Now, it will be interesting to see how, with Benson saying that she is pro fixing this, what that does for the other candidates who are running for governor, and if all the candidates on the Republican side for governor are for fixing this, I think you've got a better chance of Republicans in the legislature making different choices and doing the right thing on this.
Well,
Maybe.
Well, Paul Gazelka has been pretty firm that he's not a supporter of legalized cannabis or expanding the medical program. Scott Jensen has said that he supports this, but Scott Jensen's position, goes
Is it fluid?
Goes with the breeze and the finger.
He said
in the
he
wind.
wants this on the ballot,
right?
A constitutional ballot measure, legalization outright.
I'm pro putting things on the ballot.
Ugh. We fight over this.
But does this have to? Like, sometimes saying you're pro putting things on the ballot is a way to not be accountable for having an opinion on it.
Sure.
Sometimes it's the right move, but sometimes it's a way to escape making a decision.
Well, I will say that all four of the major candidates have come out saying that they do think that the possession of personal amounts of cannabis, the crimes that right now felonies should be reduced down. If you just have a small personal amount, you shouldn't be getting a felony. I think that's a good starting point. Mm-hmm. Dr. Shaw actually has come out and said further than that, saying that the war on drugs has really been quite a failure, kind of citing Milton Friedman, prized economist from our side of the aisle, that thinks that the drug war is just
former University of Minnesota economist Milton Friedman. I think he walked
Local
through a building. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I like Neil Shaw. He definitely says all the right things. So it'll be interesting. I think the thing that has held marijuana back is the stigma associated with it, the pop culture opinion, the judgment of marijuana. Radio hosts who took opportunities to make jokes about it like a decade ago.
I absolve you of that, by the way.
Cool.
Thank you. The marijuana guy in the party.
I like the rebranding, going with cannabis. That helps. Maybe rebrand again to make it like Freedom Plant.
Sure. Yeah, that's good.
And for me personally, and I think there's my evolution in politics. Like, there's a difference, I think, between conservative and a more liberty-minded person. And I think I used to be a conservative, thinking, well, America should be how it was depicted in the 1950s, though, never actually existed that way. Like, that's the America. That's what we should have. Ronald Reagan.
Meat and milk rationing, and in any case, well, I think it is a generational issue, and I think that's why a lot of these senators and representatives who represent areas very traditional conservative areas, like the mindset that you talk about, that they believe that people don't want that's they don't want legalization because that's not what they're hearing from their own districts. But within the next few years, I think those people are really going to start to age out, and when you get to when you get the people who are in their 40s and 50s,
age out of life,
who weren't part of this like reefer madness craze, that didn't really do that, or were the ones that were being accused of the reefer madness stuff, realizing that it wasn't that big of a deal as they become into leadership, as they get more formidable, more spots in the party. I think hopefully it doesn't take that long, but I think the tides are turning. I mean, that's what happened with gay marriage, is the cultural temperature changed, and I think that's happening with cannabis as well.
Yeah, and I don't want to be insensitive, so if I offend you and like to complain, call 651-289-4488. 4488 and file a complaint with the show host. But old people are now baby boomers. Like, they are Bill Clinton's peers and Newt Gingrich's peers and the people who experienced the 60s. And when the Bill Clinton smoking marijuana thing came out, it was such a bad thing for him politically. He had to lie and say that he never inhaled. Like, well, why did you smoke it then? You an idiot?
Get the flavor
That's
in
how
my mouth.
It works. And Newt Gingrich, after that, said, "Yeah, I smoked weed. I inhaled. That's proof that you were alive and in grad school in the '60s, or however he put it." So it's so funny how 25-ish years ago, a politician and marijuana, like, I didn't do that. Okay, I did do it, but I didn't go all the way. And now, like, I've smoked marijuana, and I've got no problem saying that out loud. Not my thing. Not my thing at all. I'm also a drunk, but I fixed that.
Getting back to what you were saying about conservatism versus liberty-minded folk, conscious of a conservative, Barry Goldwater, presidential candidate in 1964, he actually was not as much of a social conservative. He was more of a let's preserve the freedoms that were given to us by our founding fathers, and we should also be fiscally conservative and not have the government overgrown. So he was not very big on drug war type stuff like this.
Pick that up on the other side of the break. We'll let Rob Doar go. He's got things to do, and we'll come back and talk about Republicans against marijuana prohibition and where Republicans should be on marijuana in general. Rob Doar, thank you very much. I always appreciate when you come by.
My pleasure.
All right, we will take a break. If you've got thoughts or comments or questions, give us a call, 651-289-4488. Bye, Rob Doar. Welcome back to the Jack Tomczak Show. Really thought we'd get Rob to stick around because he's tried to leave early before, and I've talked him back into staying. In studio with Kurtis Hannah with Republicans Against Marijuana Prohibition, talking about the conversation has evolved into Republicans who are for marijuana prohibition. And why is that? And repeat the point you made on the other side of the break about Barry Goldwater and his take on freedom.
Yeah, so to recap, Barry Goldwater was the Republican candidate for president in '64. He ended up losing to LBJ. And then 4 years later, we got Nixon, who was the one that actually passed the Controlled Substances Act, put cannabis in Schedule 1.
Started the war on drugs.
Started the war on drugs.
How's that going?
It's not going very well.
It's expensive, too.
Yeah, it's very expensive. But I believe there's been an evolution in our party. There was a decision made that the traditional conservatism.
Conservatism?
Yeah,
There we go.
I said that wrong.
That's I'm a professional talker. It's
exactly. But it's sort of gotten. There was a merger that occurred where social conservatives decided, let's partner up with the fiscal conservatives. The the people that want to conserve liberty,
Mm-hmm.
and let's partner up. And that's kind of what happened under Reagan, who also exacerbated the war on drugs.
Mm-hmm.
But it's my belief that it would be good to have a conversation within these two factions in the Minnesota Republican Party, because they still exist to this day,
Yep.
of social conservatives and Barry Goldwater type conservatives about what direction we should go on this topic. But there's a lot of things that are not liberty issues, reasons why we should, I believe, support the legalization of cannabis as a party.
Here is how every Republican should think on this issue and all issues. And if they don't agree with me, they should probably be locked up. You can be for somebody having the liberty and freedom to do something and not think they should do it and not want to do it yourself. I'm 10 years sober. I'm an alcoholic. I understand, and addiction has taken so much from my life. Like, I'm keenly aware of what addiction can do to people, and I'm against it. But I don't think these things should be against the law. And you can have that, that still makes sense. You can be against the government prohibiting something and thinking people partaking in that isn't a good idea.
Yeah.
You can do that.
Exactly.
And that allows you to be for medical marijuana, recreational marijuana, and still think people shouldn't do it or not want to do it yourself.
Yeah, and I think that would be the perfect way forward for our party to embrace that philosophy. But there's been an inversion of the concept of freedom and liberty. There seems like...
Well, you have the freedom to do the things I think you should do.
Exactly. Or I have the freedom to not live in a society where my neighbor down the street is using a drug that I don't like. That's a type of freedom that seems to
That's
be
not actually
exposed.
freedom.
Yeah, it's an inversion, and it's not, in my opinion, something that will resonate with the general public,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore we should maybe rethink whether we want to go down that path some more and be seen as old fuddy-duddies that aren't tracking with society at large, or if we want to go a different path.
You know more than I do on this topic. And I've seen on social media, on the fake news, and out in the world that marijuana has significantly improved people's lives who are suffering from some pretty horrible stuff. And to be on the side that wants to deny somebody a substance that can relieve their pain, that's a bad side to be on.
Yeah, very much so. And there's arguments to be made that perhaps with things that are extremely addictive and that have other side effects that harm your body, that maybe you would take a cautious approach, even if it is helping someone in a certain ailment that they have. But cannabis doesn't have that. It's not highly addictive, and it doesn't have negative effects on one's body outside of if you're inhaling it like smoke, it might cause you to cough more often and have a little bit of lung issues. But other than that, it really is not a negative impairment on your body.
And it's really none of your business or government's business what somebody else is doing that is bad for their health. I mean, when government starts thinking that it's in their best interest that they get a say in somebody's health, that's bad. That's how we get large soda pops banned and vaccines mandated. And it's like government needs to butt out. And that's something that all Republicans say they believe. And they need to put their money where their mouth is.
It's true. And we're still seeing in the medical cannabis program, last year we did allow flower to be added, as was mentioned at the top of the show. So bud flower is going to be sold in Minnesota sometime before March. But it's only available to patients that are above the age of 21 or 21 or older. And so we're still kind of have this nanny state mentality with medical cannabis on this issue, whereas I believe that parents and doctors should be able to decide if you're younger than 21 that you can access this form of cannabis. So it's not just a Republican issue. The DFL was the one we're the group that wanted this ban on patients under 21 being able to get flower cannabis.
There was a story years ago that a kid who got there was a pitcher, I think, got hit by a ball coming back at him, hit him in the head, and his mom went and found marijuana, and she got into a ton of trouble for it. And my thought then is my thought now that if my kid is suffering, I'll do whatever the hell I have to do to make sure that suffering ends.
Yeah.
All right, we are out of time, so I want you to give a website if you got one, or a way that people can get in touch with you and can help. 30 seconds.
Yep. Ramp.mn, ramp.mn, and on Twitter we are ramp_mn. But our DMs are open. Feel free to check us out, get in contact with us, and let us know how you can help out.
Thank you. And when we come back, Libertarian candidate for Mayor of Minneapolis, Nate Atkins.